A Funny Taste in Music with Andrew Bird.
Hello, welcome to A Funny Taste in Music. My name's Andrew Bird. Now, this has to be a quick intro because Paul the producer has to do something very quickly, and more importantly, me and Ivo discussed how annoying it is when you listen to a podcast and the introduction goes on and rambles on and on. So we've discussed 3 minutes max. I want to make it quicker than that. So, Funny Taste in Music, Ivo Graham, brilliant comedian. There's going to be a Spotify playlist that's going to go along with it. Please donate to the Patreon page. Here we go. Some adverts, then Ivo Graham. Hope that was quick enough for you, Ivo. All right, mate. Cheers.
A Funny Taste in Music. The interview next.
I recorded intro and put it on the start. Classic podcast.
Of course, don't make it too long, though, Birdie. I can't bear those.
No, me neither.
By all means, talk a little bit about your life and what you got coming up, but 3 mins max.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Don't waffle on and make it all about yourself.
Some of those American ones, you're skipping 15 seconds, just trying to find the podcast you've signed up for.
Yeah. I want to listen to the podcast, not you aimlessly waffle about yourself and your life.
I didn't know I felt that strongly about it, to be honest, but it's really...
No, I do. Yeah. No, me too. Get into the meat of it. We've already got to wade through adverts. Yeah. Don't you go on about yourself for ages.
Who are the adverts going to be for on this episode? If you can tell me that at this stage.
I think it's some kind of crockery.
Lovely. How wholesome.
Yeah, some kind of crockery outlet, I think it is, and there's a local butcher's.
Lovely
they get a lot of advertising space on Spotify. They're doing well for themselves.
I mean, I asked that as if there were going to be any products where I would have walked away. I'll happily guest on a podcast that advertises anything, but lovely to know there's crockery at the end of the end of the road.
Do you get like that? Are you that strong about some things that you won't listen or partake in things? Because I am. I don't do any Amazon.
Yes, I'm trying to do no Amazon, which is such as a cliched thing, but it is good. It is good to do. I mean, I've got the Prime, and I do watch things on it. But I think not using it for the deliveries is a good way to try and boycott it and send your money elsewhere. But also, it slows down the impatience that I've started to feel that you tend to take for granted with the Prime, where you just need things within a day. You so rarely do. And if anything, waiting 3 to 5 working days for a book you're looking forward to reading just builds the anticipation.
Oh, doesn't it?
So yeah, well that's good. I'm glad we're on the same page about that.
And you give yourself just enough time to slightly forget you've ordered it, so it feels like a nice surprise when it arrives.
Exactly. Whereas Amazon, the Amazon dream, which I'm sure we realised in the next year or two, will be for you to order it and the man be at your door within half an hour. But yeah, order, forget, and then delight anew.
That's the timeline I go for.
All of that being said, it really bailed me out at Christmas. So
yeah.
we do give in occasionally. No matter how we try to be.
What's he called? The owner of Amazon belt thingy?
Jeff Bezos, I believe.
Jeff
Bezos.
I don't know if I don't know if my boycott of Amazon has made a chink in his overall gross earnings. I don't know if he's got a pie chart, if they've had a meeting, if I've been mentioned.
The problem is I think it's been such a good year for Amazon, what with the lockdowns and all, that I think the pros have outweighed the cons for Jeff. I think in maybe 2018, your boycott would really have really made an impact. But I think it's still a net gain.
Overall, probably over the year.
People's morals may have crept up a little, but their dependence has crept up a lot more.
Yeah. What motherfucker? He's gained out of a pandemic. It was already doing all right.
I mean, I'm a big, I'm not so cold and bitter about the pandemic that I begrudge anyone who's done well out of it. Some of our peers have made some very funny online comedy. Fair play to them. People who do home exercise classes. Even Joe Wicks, who maybe dominates the market a little bit too much. Fair play. Getting the nation fit but just making people more and more dependent on their instant deliveries and making it so hard even to buy. I was trying to buy the most recent Red Hot Chili Peppers album for someone as a joke, and we can get on to why it was a joke later on.
Yeah, let's.
But I was finding it very difficult to find somewhere to buy it online that wasn't Amazon or a subsidiary.
It is. Yeah.
I said, you know, I had to Google for 20 seconds instead of 5 seconds. It hardly destroyed my life.
Yeah. HMV's not so good online, is it? And their website's not easy to find stuff. I don't know why. It's just not that easy. And HMV, I don't know how you feel about this. When you see an album for like $14.99, you just think, what world do you think we live in? HMV. What do you think? Do you think there's people? They're really relying on the people out there that have no access to the internet other than that.
The problem with HMV is, even though they have become in recent years just as much of a sort of figure of pity as pretty much any other non-Amazon retail outlet, they're still, in my mind, and I imagine in most music fans' minds, a sort of big business, a colossus who probably made their shareholders a lot of money if they got out at the right time. I'm not against paying too much for music, or indeed paying for music at all, which you can get away without doing if you're so inclined. But there's one of the few remaining proper independent record shops in Marlborough in Wiltshire, near where I grew up. It's a lovely shop called Sound Knowledge, and me and my dad go there whenever we're at home and sort of spend a sort of condescending amount of money on CDs we've already sort of listened to death on Spotify, because it makes us feel like valid music fans. And you're paying £12 or £13 sometimes for that then, but it feels a bit more of a wholesome transaction than it going to even HMV.
Oh, this is good to hear, Ivo. I love that. Yeah, you really feel smug about yourself, like you're buying organic veg.
Yeah, exactly. Which I don't do. Absolutely happy to get my veg from Tesco, but then I pop across to Sound Knowledge and pay £13 for the Haim album.
To offset it. It's like planting a tree.
Well, I mean, you feel what's so weird is that I think we're so invested in the idea that we're sort of contributing to this tree, this shop, Sound Knowledge, that actually my dad went over Christmas and he chatted to Roger, who works there, and he said he said no, Roger says, because I said, oh, Roger, it must have been quite a hard year for the shop. Dad said, no, Roger says they're doing all right. And I was obviously delighted to hear that, but part of me also felt that means there are more benefactors than just us. I obviously don't want the shop to perish, but I want to have the very real sense that it's dependent on me and my dad alone keeping it afloat. Whereas the thought that it's fine is like, oh, right, so he's just as rich as Jeff, which obviously I suspect Roger is not as rich as Jeff.
Wow, the fact that you know the name of the person in the record shop, I love that.
Oh, I'm sure many of his clients, it's just as much Roger's as Sound Knowledge. Not to take anything away from his very nice assistants, whose names I can't remember, even though I've chatted to them a couple of times and they've made some superb recommendations. But there we go. It's lovely, and even that is, I know, a cliche being a music fan, of talking about sort of record shops. It does sell records. I don't buy records there; I buy CDs there. But it's still got already quite an old world charm compared to just streaming everything to death.
Oh yeah. Oh, this is good to hear. I mean, and I should say immediately that you're younger than me. You're the first person I've had on who's markedly younger than me. Last week was the brilliant Matt Ford, who's only a couple years younger than me, so feels about the same age. But you're a good bit younger than me. So I think to place you as in what music you would maybe listen to roughly, what year were you 15? I turned 15 in 2005. Oh, so you're pretty much 10 years younger than me then. Lovely. Good. You're a generation of music younger. This is good.
That's nice. Because, I think of us as sort of, not markedly different in age and stage. And Fordy, maybe just through sort of having worked with him a lot, I've started to feel, if I may say, even a bit of a peer of his. But then music marks you out so much, because Fordy is obviously Mr. Britpop. Though, of course, his, though I've not listened to his episode, his tastes are I'm sure more varied than that.
We spent an unforeseen amount of time talking about Bewitched and Eternal. You'll be happy to know over.
Lovely. Well, exactly.
Yeah.
The man is
what
a
it's
tapestry.
About. He certainly is. He is. Just when you think you know him, he's got more to offer, Fordy.
But I still think that the central dynamic at the heart of Matt Ford is the fact that he not only likes Oasis, but thinks that Be Here Now is their best album. That's what I think when I think
don't you worry, that was discussed as well.
Good. So, whereas that's one generation of British guitar rock, whereas I would say I'm more the people that came through in the sort of mid-noughties indie boom. I'm an Arctic Monkeys man, a Franz Ferdinand man.
Oh, this is great. I mean, when I messaged you about coming on and you said, nearly apologetically said, well, if you don't mind talking about mid-noughties indie, I was like, you what? This is exactly what I want.
Well, that's fantastic to hear.
Because I'll be honest with you, a lot of these episodes, I'm sure you've listened. I mean, they're everywhere. They're escapable, this podcast now. It's massive.
That China shop is sold out, actually. It's done.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you, Ivo. There's been a lot of old duffers on here banging on about the Smiths. I saw the Sex Pistols, all that bullshit. And quite frankly, I'm getting sick of these people. It's about time there was a bit of youth, and that is going to be you.
Well, that's nice to hear. I mean, that really captures exactly where I am in my life, age, and sort of perception of myself. Because I'll be honest, there are points. And I don't mean to make you feel, even more old and wise by comparison. But as a greying 30-year-old with a young child, I'm starting to lose my edge. Particularly in lockdown, which has aged us all about 5 years. And I'm increasingly sort of trying to keep up with new pop trends, finding that I don't know as many bands on festival lineups. Not that any of the festivals are happening, but so actually to come into a relaxed environment where the fact that I'm into a load of bands, many of whom released their best work 15 years ago, and that still makes me the sort of spring chicken that you're delighted of on the podcast. I'm very happy with that from a perspective.
You're just to get the people that haven't seen you, or that how can I put it politely? I don't want to sound like I'm having a go. You had a nice upbringing. I did
have a nice upbringing. I'd be churlish to complain about any aspect of my upbringing, other than being homesick at boarding school, which was also very much part of the plan. Well, not part of the plan. That's not what your parents are looking forward to about it, but they know that it's a risk.
Do you think that's the long-term plan of parents with boarding school? You know what they say, absence makes a heart grow fonder.
I think it's a high-risk strategy, but it sort of worked. I'm very fond of my parents. Maybe I'd be even fonder of them.
You've just said you go record shopping with your dad. There's not a lot of people who went to, normal comprehensive schools that go see Roger with their dad.
Oh, listen, I'm sure his clientele exists across the school spectrum. But yes,
of course.
But, although not, maybe you've got to have a bit knocking about in your pocket to pay £12 or £13 as established for music.
Oh yeah.
I had a nice upbringing, a nice education, and parents who managed to convey the fact that they loved me, despite the fact that they were happy not to see me for weeks at a time. And that is that's a magic trick. It really is.
They really pull that off as parents, as like young parents that we are. You've got to admire that.
Well, yeah. I mean, sometimes. I mean, listen. I wouldn't. I'm not here to discuss the relative merits and demerits of boarding school. I don't think I would send my daughter or any other children now. I think it's already feeling quite outdated as an institution, and I can't afford it. But I also think that there are things, as well as having quite a nice education, and there were nice sort of fields to play football in and stuff. But also, I do like a bit of the emotional hardiness it's given me. Some would call it repression, but the fact that I don't know. I feel it very plugged into my feelings, of course, but I don't miss things loads because I sort of learned how to not miss them too much while I was at school. God, I've not sort of reached this deep into myself outside of a therapy session, and I'm here to talk about Franz Ferdinand. But the point is that I don't feel I was really traumatised by boarding school, and I'm still able to really, emotionally invest in some of my favourite music.
Yeah, listen, I have not got the qualifications or empathy to deal with your emotions. So let's talk about Franz Ferdinand, shall we?
Sorry, cut that bit out. Where was I going with it?
I don't know how that happened, but lockdown has done this kind of thing to a lot of us. To be fair, we've all reached meltdowns at different points, but you are keeping it real as well. You went to boarding school, but you support Swindon, so in many ways you're keeping it. Some would say too real.
It's feeling very real this season, and some would say, if they were being very cynical, that me supporting Swindon and banging on about it as much as I have is almost an attempt to sort of balance out the Eton, shall we say? And
you think?
Well, listen,
it's not quite David Cameron. I support Aston Villa. Come on,
or West Ham. Even he can't remember.
No. You go to games, you put in more effort than your average football fan.
Well, that's what I would say. If it is a lie, then I really am committing to it.
You're really going deep with this lie. You live in the role. You're like a undercover detective, like in The Departed.
I haven't seen The Departed, and I know that I should, but it's very long. Maybe that's
it is very long, project. But trust me, that was a cracking reference.
All right, well, listen, I'll watch it and I'll text you. But yeah, that, I'm not, my posh uncle takes me to watch Chelsea sometimes, and I'm happy to admit that as well. But I go under my own steam and my own finances to watch Swindon Town play lower league dirge football, and it's a pleasure. It really is.
Good man. So you're 10 years younger than me. That's quite good. That's good that so you're at that stage where I was like, because I grew up in the middle of nowhere, so didn't see much live music. So the music you're into was when I lived in London, and I was mad going to gigs. I couldn't believe that, because I grew up in Northamptonshire, where you didn't really see live gigs. There was no buses. There was the Road Mender, which was quite a good venue. I didn't know how to get there,
Anyone play I only know through the circuit, but the Picture Drome. Did bands come to the Picture Drome?
I think they did a bit, but not. I couldn't. For me to get there from where I lived, you're talking a £25 taxi journey home because you couldn't get a bus. So I didn't see live bands.
Worth it. Yeah,
it was going to the pub. Jukebox was the music. How I engaged with music as a teenager. But when I moved to London, it blew my mind. I lived in Balham and Streatham. So it blew my mind I could get a bus to Brixton Academy.
Oh, man. I could get in London.
I could get the tube to a gig and be home in like half an hour. It blew my mind. And the pub I worked in, the Bedford, where the Banana Cabaret is a brilliant, brilliant music venue.
I didn't know that you worked at the Bedford, and I also didn't know it was a music venue, although obviously that makes sense. That was the first place I ever watched stand-up.
Was it?
It was the thing that made me sort of, to use the old cliche, made me realise it was a real job that people did in pubs and not just what was on telly. I saw
Who did you see?
This is just the ultimate posh cliche. I saw Simon Evans being very dry at Banana Cabaret, and I thought, yes, I too can witter on about privilege.
What year would that have been?
I could put a month on it. I would say that was in December 2008.
Oh no, I'd left by then. I remember the date, July the 6th, 2005, because the day after was the 7/7 bombings.
Right, lovely.
So I left the pub, got hammered, woke up, turned the news onto that.
Goodness me.
But so I'd left by then. But yeah, the Bedford is more of a music venue than it was. I don't know what it's like now. It used to be an amazing music. My wife, she worked beyond the bar as a manager. When I left, she became manager. And as we all know, a bar manager is basically a barman that hasn't left.
Yes.
That was me for a while. But she remembers at the bar, this young lad who wasn't old enough to drink in there was one of the musicians, and everyone was going on about how great he is. And he gave her a demo, and we were courting at the time. It's a word I'm sure you'd use, Ivo. You'd be a fan of. I remember her saying to me, "Oh, you've got to come in. This young lad's on who's amazing. Apparently, you've got to come in and see him on your way back from your gig. So I went in and saw him. Can't remember much about it. Paolo Nutini.
Oh, wow. I mean, I'll be honest, you made me wait for that name. And
yeah, it was worth it.
Nutini is, and I'm embarrassed to say I'm not massively familiar with Nutini's work apart from a lovely song called New Shoes. Is it New Shoes?
Yeah, I think so, yes. Yeah.
But I mean, it's a hell of a person to have just been given a demo by. And also, it's so nice to imagine anyone who's now massive being at the handing demos over the bar stage. Being
underaged in a pub they're playing in, handing over CD demos.
Yeah.
Which she now can't find. But so I was mid noughties indie I was constantly going to gigs around 2003, 4, 5. Then right up until 2009, where I got married, like you, have young children. Then the thought of going to a live gig, now, is such an investment. Whereas I used to see bands that were playing that night. I remember someone going, Libertines are doing Brixton Academy tonight. Wow. I know someone who might get tickets. You're going.
You're ever so young.
That was
just
it.
Just a spontaneous trip to the Libertines at 5 hours' notice.
Unbelievable.
Weeks in the planning. Babysitters lined up at a fortnight's notice.
It's mind-blowing now. So what... so sort of...
Would you agree with my claim earlier that the Brixton Academy is the best venue in London, or are we just both being nostalgic for it because we both lived in South London and gone to a lot of gigs there?
I, for a long time, would agree with that because I've said a few times in Brixton, the way it slopes, wherever you stand, if you're standing, is a good view.
That's it.
There's no bad place to be in Shepherd's Bush Empire is good, but there's big pillars and there's like a balcony over you where you feel like, but Brixton, it just it feels massive and small at the same time, weirdly. I don't know how they do that, but
I can add nothing to that summary of it. I think it's beautiful, and in this live musicless period of history, it's making me feel quite sad, to be honest.
Yeah, me too. The only downside with Brixton is it's in Brixton, so there are going to be a lot of nutters in there.
Yes, I suppose so. But then a certain nutter contingent adds to the sort of thrill of a live gig, doesn't it? Certainly compared to a gig where there's no atmosphere at all, or whether it's just phone central. That's one of my middle-aged things to lament. I went to watch the XX at Brixton Academy about 3 years ago, and they were phenomenal. And they've got a very young audience, and fair play to them. But it was just all phones. And
that's funny you say that. That's just made me realise that when I stopped watching gigs so often, that phones were still not everyone was. You were just starting to notice it. It was just starting to be that's annoying. Put your phone down. That was just starting. So now for you, those gigs, it's just a norm.
I think it is the norm. And again, you'd be mad to waste too much of your energy on getting cross with it. And also, I waste so much time watching concert footage on YouTube. So in a way, I've got to be thankful to some of these people who've recorded it all for me, stuck at home. But increasingly, most gigs have particularly stuff at like festivals. There's an official recording of it, or the band put out something on YouTube of it, and just everyone with their wobbly sort of handheld stuff. It's a shame. I watched a band also at Brixton Academy called Public Service Broadcasting about 5 years ago, and it was one of the best gigs I've been to. I think they're wonderful, but also they and their stuff is very atmospheric. And this is going to sound unbelievably wanky. Are you familiar with their work?
No.
Well, it's all about... it's not all about history. I don't want to sound too bookish. But they're lovely tweed-wearing beta males whose songs, though they have lovely sort of rhythmic chunk to them and instrumental flourishes, they're also all rooted around historical events, and they use sort of crackly archive like vocal footage. They did a whole album which they were touring at the time about the race for space and Sputnik and things.
Yeah.
And so they had this amazing stage show to capture that, and they have songs where it goes silent in the middle one to capture Apollo disappearing behind the moon, and all of those moments were so poignant at the Brixton Academy because they'd had this really funny skit at the beginning before they came out, which basically lightheartedly mocked people who got their phones out at gigs, and basically said,
nice.
If you get your phone out, you're going to ruin it, and people are going to think you're a bit of a bellend. And it was just heaven. Not a phone in the air, Bertie. Anyway, that's enough of that. I'm 30 years old. Going on 50.
What a good tactic, though. What a good tactic, just to make instead of going the Chris Rock, your phone's in bags on the way in, they've gone more subtle. They've played on the emotions. We'll leave it up to you, but this is how we feel about it.
Well, maybe, I suppose, at sort of touring indie band level, maybe the costs of doing that, whatever it's called, yonder phone pouch thing, would mean you're on a massive loss compared to just a pre-recorded skit you can play over the tannoy. That being said, sorry.
Yeah, they've got more artistic with it, but yeah, you're right.
I went to one of those comedy gigs where you had to put your phone in a pouch, and it did make the atmosphere a lot more special, and I talked to my friend in the intervals, and it was real. So I do like that. I do like it.
I've never been to one of those, but I do agree with it, completely agree with it. But so you've gone to Brixton a lot. Where did you live in South London again?
Well, I lived in Stockwell with my gran for a year. So that was very nice for easy Brixton access.
Me too.
That wasn't why I lived with my gran. I lived with her because she's a lovely grandmother, and I was cash light first year out of uni. But
doing stand-up, yeah. You didn't ring your gran and say, "Oh, gran, you got a spare room." How convenient are the live music venues to you? Just down the Victoria line. Good work, gran. We'll make the bed up.
Not even just at Victoria Line. A lovely walk.
Of course.
A lovely bracing walk to the Brixton Academy. Never managed to persuade Grandma to come with me, sadly.
That is a shame.
even to the history-based public service broadcasting gig, which she might genuinely have enjoyed for a sort of nostalgic perspective.
Oh, of course, that'd be right up her alley, that, surely. But she wasn't. No, she wasn't into mid-noughties indie.
It's hard to say what she was into, and we did have lots of lovely chats about lots of lovely topics while I lived with her, but they were never about how the Arctic Monkeys demos were better than the songs that ended up on the album.
So that's funny. You lived in Stockwell, just down the road from Brixton. So when you see bands that you like or kind of interested in, or even to the point where you don't even know them that well, but people are talking about them a bit, if they were at Brixton, you were like, well, I'm going. Like, I didn't know who the Libertines really were. That much.
Who the Libertines were? What year was this?
This would have been 2003.
Oh, okay. So really, the most exciting time to see the Libertines.
It was just as they were. It was just as they were. I saw them just as everyone was talking about them, and they were going massive. And then Pete Doherty was just starting to be in the papers and stuff. So it was around that time. It was like seeing the Sex Pistols when the Sex Pistols first started. It was that level of, that's how it felt. Everyone was like, whoa. But I'll admit, the actual gig sounded like one long slurge of music. I couldn't pick out one song from the other.
Well, as the dust has settled on the Libertines, the romance of it will never go. But and some of the songwriting is great, but it's a bit of a mess at points. Yeah, and that is part of its charm. But yeah, I can imagine as a live gig, just purely in terms of sort of, musical aesthetics, it might not have been perfect. But just to say you were there. Whereas I can't really say that I've got much, I know what having seen the Sex Pistols would mean. But actually, I'm not really interested in that, whereas I'd have loved to have seen an early Libertines gig. And there's still a delay between me and you, because you're now in the mid-noughties, as an adult living in London, going to these gigs. having not got to see anything you wanted to in the 90s. Whereas
Yes.
I'm mostly going to gigs in the, whatever you'd call the next decade, the 10s, having been at boarding school in the mid-noughties and not really able to go and see most of the things that I wanted to then. I really didn't start going to gigs regularly until I was at uni in sort of 2009, 10.
It's good that we're exactly 10 years apart. So I've got the thing of, in the mid-noughties, not seeing the bands in the 90s, and you are now, wanting to see the
catching
bands.
up. I've spent 10 years catching up on some of the things I'd really have liked to have seen in 2005. So actually, my bedroom as a teenager was just plastered with posters for tours from NMEs that I'd cut up. And I wasn't trying to sort of cultivate the impression to any visitor, not that it was a much visited bedroom, that I'd been to these concerts, because I'd been to literally none of them, but just I thought the posters were cool. And so I was, I was dreaming of a life that I was restricted from having.
There was definitely a time in the mid-noughties that I remember, maybe I'm saying that because I was going to the gigs all the time, but there was a time where it was Kasabian, Jet. I loved Jet. Kasabian, Jet, Arctic Monkeys, Athlete. Loved Athlete.
Athlete were great.
That first album was phenomenal.
I think the first couple of Athlete... I mean, I tend to stick with bands loyally past their commercial peak. So I'm a big fan of Athlete's third album. But I do recognise that 1 and 2 were the big ones. And also, I'm delighted that Joel Pott from Athlete is now, I believe, a much in-demand songwriter who works with the likes of George Ezra. And as someone who... I have a lot of insecurities about the fact that, comedians, we're sort of... we don't always have the longest shelf lives. Certainly, for live stuff and doing lots of live gigs gets harder as you get older and you have a family and stuff. So when I find out that, musicians I've really liked have then moved into songwriting and become successful in that, I'm like, artists can have lots of phases to their careers. We can grow old with dignity. We can pay the mortgage. Do you know what I mean? We
can. Yes, I like doing that. I like Googling, where are they now? Where are they?
Rather than just... sometimes when it's just like they now release their latest album, their 8th album on their own record label, and the album doesn't even have a Wikipedia page, and you're like, no.
Yeah, I'm like you. I keep going. Like the Thrills. I love the Thrills.
That's a very nice reference, although I couldn't really tell you much beyond the first Thrills album.
Exactly. The second one was good, but after that, sweet Jesus, it dropped off.
What do you think that... Do you think that bands... I mean, what kind of received wisdom do you buy into when it comes to... do you think that most bands just are at their freshest and most exciting when they're getting started, and it's just impossible to keep recapturing that? Or do you think that just as many bands do evolve and get better and better and settle into new grooves?
Yes, I was thinking about that a lot, because I think... Because one example of that, there's bands that... their first albums for most bands is a backlog of, say, 8 years of writing and playing. So that album, they rattle off generally. Then the second album, they might have a bit of momentum going, and that can be even better or as good. But then the third album, everyone talks about the different second album. I think the third album...
you'll often see... This is so specific, but... as I said, I've spent a lot of time on these sorts of Wikipedia pages. You often see that bands, they get a 2-album deal. So even if the second one, as you say, may not stand the test of time as much, it's got the backing, it's got the momentum still. They're doing the big festival gigs off the back of the first album. And it's actually, you get a bit of grace period before the petering out can begin. And I'm so interested by how you beat that, essentially, if you're in a band, and how you evolve, how you pick up new people, don't lose the old ones. I think, to be honest, from a noughties onwards timeline, the Arctic Monkeys are the most interesting one.
I would say that, I was just about to say that. Kasabian as well.
I think I'm going to say that I don't think Kasabian are as good an example. And that's not just because I'm trying to distance myself from Kasabian in light of recent revelations about their personal lives, because that doesn't change the fact that they've got written some great rock songs over the years, and it has taken on a slightly more, maybe electronic hue in recent albums, but it's still quite sort of, it's been quite rocky all the way through. Whereas I don't know if you've listened to the most recent Arctic Monkeys album from a couple of years ago, but it's a sort of concept, sort of jazz lounge album about living on the moon.
Retired rock stars living on the moon.
Exactly, and it made people very, very angry.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I as you say that, I would say, the Arctic Monkeys. If you go through their albums, the first album is a classic British, classic first album, stands the test of time. It's going to be in there with the top 50 albums forever.
Yeah. It's so funny.
And the second album is a really, really good album. Then the third album is sort of all right. And then you could say, and then like you say, they're going through that journey then, and what happened. They could have easily, the Arctic Monkeys could have very easily just dropped off completely like other bands. But the album after that, Suck It and See, I think is a brilliant album.
I love Suck It and See.
Absolutely love it. But then the album after that, I think, is their best album, even better than their debut, AM.
I think AM is you've got to. I mean, they all have something to admire. Just the balls on the lads. But yeah, the second one I love, and I remember being sort of a teenager and just not being able to believe that they'd made it that quickly. And I know maybe older listeners and people who remember how many albums the Beatles put out might say that was the norm back in the day. But not in the noughties. Yeah. The second Arctic Monkeys album, which was so beefy and confident, they were still, I think, teenagers or just, maybe turned 20, and it came out like a year later. And it was so good. And the third one was a bit of a dirge. And the fourth one had some beautiful songs. I love Suck It and See, but it's still not that commercial. And then the fifth one was like, we would like to headline all of the festivals again. So here are some massive, massive radio-friendly rock numbers. And
every
then the
song
sixth
could
one
be a
was like,
single.
We're bored of that now. So let's lose all those new fans again.
I've got to admit, the sixth album, I'm one of them. It didn't make me angry, but I was because I loved AM so much.
AM was and I think the fact that they were sort of clearly able to do something like AM with relative ease. The fact that they took 5 years over the one after it, and it sort of feels like it could have been a solo album. But as I say, you don't get to question, with the likes of, and I'm going to take a big leap from the Arctic Monkeys here to a true legend, but, with your David Bowie or whoever it is, you only get the evolution because of the risks. And if you're getting pissed off, that probably means that something truly amazing is about to be around the corner. Or Radiohead, I suppose, another real modern cliche of that.
Yeah. But and with David Bowie, you get the benefit of nostalgia and time to go, he took these risks. But at the time, people were probably going, fucking hell, 4 years, and this is what he's done. You forget that. Yeah, the Arctic Monkeys album, that last album, I'm one of them where I gave it 3 listens and really tried. But it wasn't really for me. But I'm not just saying this to you because we're talking about it now and trying to be nice and diplomatic. But I said this to my wife. I said, I really don't like that album, but I really admire the fact that they've made it. The balls to make it.
And I love the thought of you and you and your wife having that conversation. You being prepared to separate your instinctive feelings and your respect for them as artists.
Yeah, it's like
across the kitchen table.
It's like, they've pissed me off, but fair play.
And you can still listen to the old ones. Those don't get taken away.
No, they're still there.
I imagine the gigs on that tour must have been fairly strange as they lurched
as they dipped in and out.
Are You Mine to one of the Moon Hotel ones.
Yeah, as they go from Suck It and See to there was a lot of very distinct bar breaks.
Yes.
During that, I imagine the bar got heaving at very distinct moments during that gig. But
I always find that a little bit depressing when you can sense the atmosphere change as a new song is introduced.
Yeah, a new song comes on, you see people elbowing past in their droves going to the bar. You're like, hey, guys, come on.
Come on. This is all part of the journey.
Stick with it. Yes, this is if you're watching football, this is just some of the build-up play in midfield. But
I like the build-up play. Sometimes this is the whole rubbish relegation season you need to go through so that next season's promotion will be all the sweeter.
Better example, Ivo. Better example. This is why you're doing the TV stuff. Well done.
Well, as a Swindon fan, relegation seasons are never far from my mind.
Yeah, fair enough. Arctic Monkeys. So when did you? Because they're one of the bands that's how I felt with Oasis. I felt like your parents' generation had the Beatles and stuff like that, and older brothers and older people going on about Nirvana and the Smiths and all that. And then finally you get your band that you're like, yeah, but this is for us and this stands up to all of that. And after Oasis, I was like, like I feel happy I can talk down to you, Ivo, that I know more about music than you because I'm older and I've got Oasis. Do you know what I mean? That kind of attitude.
I think that's fair enough.
Yeah, but for you, then you got Arctic Monkeys and then suddenly you can go, that's for you, that's what that must have been like. And for me, Arctic Monkeys was one of the first bands that were younger than me, and for a younger generation than me, that I was like, oh, fuck, that would have been great to be a teenager listening to them. That's the first time I felt that. I remember listening to the lyrics like Reebok Classics, knackered Converse and tracky buttons tucked in socks. Going, fuck, if you're a teenager now, that'd be like, that's me and my mates.
No,
that would have been amazing. Can you remember getting into the Arctic Monkeys? How you got into them?
Yeah, very much so. Although, again, I can't claim sort of full identification, I think, either from an age or stage perspective. I mean, sure, I grew up with them and have I suppose, even sort of lazy things like being, roughly the same generation. But actually, I wasn't on MySpace, which was the sort of massive thing of all their demos being on there and people finding out about them before they even released anything officially. I think I probably, I got the demos, as I say, eventually, but I didn't have that live feeling of being plugged into their sort of secret fan community at that very specific moment in time. I was doing my Latin homework at boarding school, so I wasn't, queuing for nightclubs and arguing with bouncers and all the other stuff that they, observe so wryly on that first album. Again, I vaguely understood it, and I can understand it a lot more now. But they weren't speaking to me about my life as a teenager, because I was just trying to get the A-star that I'd assured my dad that I would.
That sentence there was everything I hoped this podcast with you would be.
Good.
Talking about the Arctic Monkeys queuing up for nightclubs, you were doing your Latin homework. That was exactly what I hoped this could be.
I think I've settled into a groove over the years of talking in fairly broad brushstrokes about how my boarding school life was not the same as an Arctic Monkeys lyric. And, I stood in some very long nightclub queues at university, and I sung Ritz to the Rubble to myself then, but it was too late. They'd moved on to more wistful material by then.
Right.
So I think, I think also there's, I hadn't really been to gigs by that point, although I saw them at a festival on the sort of in 2007 when Favourite Worst Nightmare had just come out. So I did. That was one of the first and most exciting gigs I ever went to. But it was still.
That would have been good.
It was brilliant,
big
but
it
was an music festival in Switzerland because my family lived in Switzerland at the time because of my dad's work in the financial sector. So it wasn't even like I saw them headline Reading, or I saw them playing a mid-afternoon set to a load of detached Swiss music fans who they probably weren't giving it their best for.
This again. To put this in perspective, I've had like Steve Gribbin on here talking about he was in a band that supported the Pogues before they were called the Pogues.
Right.
Ben Norris talking about going to damned concerts with skinheads. And you're now talking about seeing the Arctic Monkeys in Switzerland because your dad works in the financial sector and lived in Switzerland. I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed that sentence as well.
Thanks very much.
Oh, God, that was good.
I'm glad to deliver on expectations.
That was exhilarating, that sentence.
I remember
really
that.
Was.
I remember being there, partly thinking, I can't believe I'm, whatever it must have been, 16 years old, watching the Arctic Monkeys at the peak of their powers, or as it turned out, the first of their many peaks.
Yes.
And without even my parents, who were an hour away in Zurich. But there was also part of me going, this isn't really watching the Arctic Monkeys in the truest sense. I even remember thinking, because you could get really far forward, because Swiss music festivals are so well organised, and people are so respectful and diplomatic and neutral. It clears very neatly between each act. So you could get quite far forward. So we were basically on the barrier. But even then I was thinking, in possibly quite an ungrateful way, I was like, we shouldn't be able to be this close. It shouldn't be like this. And I think seeing anyone in the mid-afternoon at a festival is not quite the same as it being a sort of a proper gig somewhere like Brixton Academy, or indeed the Sheffield Lead Mill. Imagine watching them in Sheffield.
Oh, yes. I loved Linkin Park at the start, 2000. They're one of them I got into straight away. That first album was one of them where it's just every song on this, like Arctic Monkeys, every song on this is great. And then there hadn't been albums like that for a while. The mid-90s pomp of Oasis, that's what it was. Every song on an album has to be great. You can't get away with a couple of good singles and a load of filler. And then there was not many albums like that for a while.
You do see the late 90s written off a lot in sort of music history, particularly British music history, as just sort of the death of Britpop and the fading a lot of those great bands, and not a lot of stuff coming through, and a lot of sort of bedwetter indie like Travis, who I loved, but I do see a sort of not the most rabble rousing.
Again, we completely agree. Again, that some of those bands got lumped into that really unfairly, like Travis, Stereophonics, and stuff. Where you think I absolutely love Travis, and that's unfair because their early stuff is more, and they supported Oasis.
Yeah,
but then,
there's the first Travis album, which a lot of people don't even know exists. It's very rocky. There's a song about fancying a teenager. It doesn't get more rock and roll than that.
No, that's right out of the books of Chuck Berry and Elvis being a pedo, isn't it?
Exactly. Elvis and Travis, always in the same sentence. But you do surprise me with Linkin Park, because the stereotype around that, not to lecture you about your own passions, is that it's angst for teenagers or emotional young men and women. And I think that I wasn't a particularly angsty teenager, but it sort of fitted the kind of, I don't have to listen to my parents music in the car anymore. I can put my headphones in and listen to a man shouting. That was what I quite enjoyed. Whereas you as a cool young man who presumably just moved to London and could start going to live gigs.
Well, not quite then. I was when 2000. It was when I still lived at home and working in a factory.
Oh, so right. Well, then in that case, the angst is perfect.
It was perfect. Yeah, I wanted to get out of this factory, go to London and be a stand-up. Everything you say and do. One step closer to London. I'm about to break. So it's perfect. Oh, what an album. And
it's such a good album. And actually the second, here we are again on second albums.
Yeah.
The second Linkin Park album, which was one of the first albums I sort of was excited to buy in a shop. And I think therefore emotionally invested in even more.
Yeah.
I think there's some colossal songs on that.
Yes.
There's a song called Faint, which starts with this sort of jerky electronic violin. And I played it to my mum, who has, obviously a million qualities as a mother and a person, but is not a music fan, really, even of some of the nice stuff that my dad has tried for decades to get her into.
So you thought Linkin Park would be the way to go?
I was on a high need to nothing with Linkin Park. But at the age of 13, I said, Mum, this one's actually got a bit of violin. Like I was teeing up some Brahms. You've got a sort of 10 seconds of violin at the top, and then Chester's ranting again.
Wow, you really thought you could lull her in with that? It's a bit of violin before he shouts.
I remember her saying, I sort of see what you mean, but it's still a bit much for me. And fair play.
That was a fair mother appraisal, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, that second album was absolutely great. And then I think it's the third album. Yeah, Minutes to Midnight.
Then we're on our Minutes to Midnight, which was released either in 2006, 7 or 8, which you're going to put into the podcast.
We're yet to confirm. But and then Jay-Z, that era was where I sort of lost interest a bit.
Well, that was probably where I got off the bus as well, but less because I felt that the quality was dropping, but more because I think it was all about my NME subscription and my guitar bands in skinny jeans. The appeal of an American 6-piece with their own in-house DJ suddenly didn't mean quite as much to me.
Well put. But then the last album, Linkin Park's last album, is absolutely brilliant. And I got into it and bought it and just started getting into it just before he died. So I had got into it, but yeah, even before he died, it's a brilliant album. I've got some funny footage of my two sons in the back of the car while my wife's driving, filming them moshing their heads to Linkin Park.
Oh, that's lovely to hear. I've got to say, of the many things I've enjoyed communing with you about today, hearing your commitment to sticking with bands and rediscovering bands, past their, commercial or artistic peak, I think it's one of the great qualities in a music fan.
Yeah, good point.
Let alone getting your sons to mosh to it.
In a way, because people, what you said about Arctic Monkeys, sort of is a good point about you got into them, but not like as in you're on MySpace and there's not that many. Everyone after the fact claims that as a band got big, they were like there as there was 12 people in a pub watching. Very few people were. Most of us get into bands just after the cusp of them.
I don't think I've seen any bands before they were massive, or at least before they were quite big. I've never been on the inside like that.
No, me neither. Even, my Paolo Nutini, but I don't...
Yeah, of course, your Paolo Nutini anecdote will... If you can find that demo, then you'll never have to do a comedy gig ever again.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking that we can't find that. Yeah, and I don't remember a second of the gig as well, so... That's bad. And apparently I sat at the bar chatting with Newton Faulkner and don't remember that either.
Listen, it's turning into quite a name-drop heavy podcast.
I know, but how can you not remember that? He's quite a distinctive-looking chap. I sat having a cup of tea with him at the bar.
Hang on. You mean you can't remember that, but you've been told that's what you did?
Yeah, I remember my wife saying, he's one of the musicians on tonight. I was like, all right, mate.
Yeah, Faulkner is going to stand out a little bit more in a crowded Bedford bar.
You would think.
A teenage Nutini.
I have no memory of it. But yeah, so Linkin Park, absolutely love because their last album is really melodic and there's sort of some of it sounds quite indie guitar rock, and then it will go a bit heavier and that. But I love that. There's a bit of everything in it. And I am a sucker for shouty singing with rapping entwined. Love it. But you fell away,
having
and
got your
more
boys
indie.
excited in it. Did you then say, well, if you like that, listen to this, and then take him back to 2001?
Oh yeah.
I can't wait to force my music tastes on my daughter. It is it's one of the most tedious things you can do as a parent, but when it works, and I do have this, if I say so myself, adorable relationship with my dad, where we're mostly into the same sorts of things, and the cloning process has broadly been a success. So if I can get as much mid-noughties indie rock into my daughter's, whatever means she consumes her music by in 10 years' time, as my dad did with his sort of 70s prog and then 80s sort of soft rock, essentially.
Well, normally that's what I ask at some point. What do you remember growing up hearing, and what did your dad? What do you remember bonding over musically with your dad? What do you remember?
My dad has an admirably eclectic music taste, and he's still keeping his hand in every year. He he goes to Roger, he buys a few more albums, he makes a compilation CD at the end of the year of his favourite tracks of the year. He gets very stressed in the autumn if he's feeling that year's compilation CD is looking a bit light. So he'll sort of complain that he's not got into enough new music, or crucially that often that we haven't recommended him enough good stuff. Or occasionally he'll even say, which I think is the most arrogant thing you can say, particularly in this age of everything being available, he'll say, maybe it's just been a bad year for music. You go, no, I think you're not digging enough.
Yeah, I like the thought of your dad going in the music shop going, Roger, you got to help me out here.
You've got to help me out. It's October and I've still only got 4 tracks for the compilation. I've got to hit 80 minutes on the CD, otherwise I failed.
2 of these I'd describe as filler.
Yeah,
Roger, you've got to give me...
If he's got more than 2 or 3 songs by the same artist, then he's essentially... That's not making a compilation CD.
No.
That's just whittling down an album you've enjoyed that year. So it's inevitably getting a little bit more... middle of the road. I mean, to be fair, as mine is already, but there's a bit more, sort of folky, sort of gentle rock stuff. But some of the stuff that he was, and he played in bands when he was a teenager and sort of played along to sort of quite proggy stuff. There's a Dutch band called Focus who have an iconic and famously very difficult song to play, as Dad has often said. They just couldn't keep up with it, but they tried their best, called Hocus Pocus, which was used in an amazing, I think, Nike ad for the World Cup about 10 years ago with, Rooney and Cannavaro and people like that. I only say it in that Italian accent because there's this sort of whole Italian opera singer staged to the advert, but never mind. Anyway, so he loved, I think he played in bands and played some quite weird and heavy stuff, and is a big fan of high concept stuff like Tubular Bells.
Right.
And then by the 80s, it's, mainstream rock like U2. It's his favourite band, the Waterboys, mixture of...
I had a housemate
that... and sort of Celtic folk.
Yeah, played that to death. I had a housemate that...
Really?
That played that to death, that Waterboys song. And still now...
The Whole of the Moon?
Yeah, and I could still... He must have played it every day for months, and still now if it comes on I go, oh yes,
oh, that's nice, because usually if you've got a housemate that plays something into the ground, if it's not your choice you'll end up resenting it. So I'm glad
you do. Yeah, I had that with it took me a long time to get into Elbow because I had a housemate that played that album to death.
Play who?
Elbow, yeah.
The line cut out for a millisecond, so I wasn't sure whether it was Elbow or Elvis.
Oh, right. No. Elbow, yeah.
Very similar back catalogues.
Yeah. But the Waterboys, yeah, brilliant.
I mean, I got my dad a T-shirt this Christmas, a Waterboys T-shirt saying, "You saw the crescent, I saw the whole of the moon." My Christmas presents to my dad have become such like lazy nostalgia triggers. Essentially, it's either a reissue of an album he loves from 20 years ago with a few sort of new unreleased demos, or it's like literally just a T-shirt. This one didn't even fit, so it was not a successful Christmas.
That T-shirt is mainly about the sentiment, isn't it?
I hope it's about the sentiment because it's also about my father's exposed midriff. He's too tall for Waterboys merch.
I don't think he would have worn that anyway, would he? But
I think it. Well, we went to watch the Waterboys together in Trowbridge in 2006. And one of the reasons I bought a T-shirt for him is because we both, I mean, like we were teenagers, which to be fair, I was. We wrote Waterboys lyrics on like plain white T-shirts and wore them around the festival as if we'd sort of pioneered our own niche, a sort of folk merch. So I thought, come on, Dad, just, we're very proud of our own stuff, but here's some official Waterboys stuff. Oh, it's too small. Never mind. But that was probably, my dad always talks about that as one of the great days of his, certainly the last 20 years, was going to Trowbridge to watch the Waterboys, and they smashed it. And there was also a Scottish singer supporting them called Karen Polwart, whose albums he then bought and we listened to in the car all summer. And one of Karen Polwart's songs is now one of his Desert Island Discs. Which nice. The invitation from the BBC has not been forthcoming for my dad to reminisce about a career in the financial sector, interspersed with various prog rock songs from the 70s and folk rock songs from the noughties. But
I tell you what, he's ready to go.
Well, listen,
that call comes.
Are you ready to go?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not actually ready to go. I love Desert Island Discs. It would be, the ultimate career goal, but I find it quite hard to narrow it down. Whereas my dad, he's got the 8 in his head, and occasionally one will get replaced. One got replaced just a few weeks ago for the first time in years, very excitingly, and he'll let me know, and he'll say, I've got a new one on the Desert Island Discs now, and then we'll talk about which one had to make way for it.
That's what I imagine the phone call. You get a phone call from your dad. Hello, Dad. Everything all right? Is Mum all right? Yeah. Everything's
never mind
fine.
about
her. Yeah. We need to talk about the lineup. Things have changed, Ivo. Things have changed since you've been away.
Well, that's the thing. His latest one is from this lovely American folk singer called Samantha Crane, and it's a beautiful song. But on the Desert Island Discs, I don't think he could have that and the Karen Polwart song, because they've both got their own individual personalities and charm. But are you going to knock out a Talking Heads live version, which is one of his other ones, to make room for a second, campfire folk ballad? I don't know. These are the difficult choices you have to make.
But I tell you what, from this podcast, we've talked about a lot of bands, we've agreed on a lot of music, but what I've taken mainly is how much I like your dad from this podcast.
Listen, if you want to get him on next week, he would be delighted.
If this would make him happy to be on this podcast, if he's not getting Desert Island Discs, I'm happy to have Ivo Graham's dad on. But I'll only do it if he promises to do the whole podcast in an ill-fitting Waterboys t-shirt.
Yeah, exactly. Of no benefit for the listeners whatsoever, but just a lovely mental image all the way through.
But it'll make me happy. But Ivo, we'll have to get your dad on, and you'll have to come on again, because I feel there's more. There's more.
We've scratched the surface, haven't we? But that's just
often
that's
do
with music. If you've got several decades of being into stuff, there's a lot of very niche anecdotes out there. It's been a pleasure to discover all the overlaps. I expected the Arctic Monkeys. I did not expect Linkin Park. Wonderful stuff.
No. Arctic Monkeys, just to finish on, I reckon then, it's a tricky one, but a favourite Arctic Monkeys lyric, if you can think of one. I'll tell you mine. I'll tell you mine while you have a think. Well, one of mine, just to sum up why they're so great. I've mentioned this song before. This is a lyric from a song I've mentioned before, and a lyric from that. This is a different lyric from the same song. The bit in Suck It and See, the song Suck It and See, where he says, she's rarer than a can of dandelion and burdock, and those other girls are just post-mixed lemonade. Wow, that is...
It's such a lovely song, and I felt it in my heart, in my bones, even though I'd never drunk dandelion and burdock or post-mixed lemonade. And very occasionally, I'll see him in a shop and go, there we are.
Yeah.
This one's for you, Alex.
You felt those lyrics deep in you as you
as I had another helping
longingly out the window doing your Latin homework. It's a later era, but
it still stands up.
Yeah. Can you? Is there other bits of the early albums you remember? There was.
I'm obviously going to. I'm now going to sound like someone who's now never heard an Arctic Monkeys song and is bluffing by saying, there's too many to choose from.
No, there is though. You're right, because because his lyrics. You're right. You are right, because there's so many lyrics
real
in a
stuff
song.
Goes into them, and actually, the Moon one, as I'm going to keep calling it, even though I know it's called Tranquility Base Hotel and Casino.
Of course you do.
That's got some really, really lovely lyrics on it, and there's I can't. There's one about horse racing, which has got a lovely sort of backstory about how the lyric was gifted to him by his granddad. I thought that was very cute. But let's go all the way back to the beginning, literally, and say that anticipation has a habit to set you up for disappointment. Is one of the great opening lines to a debut album, surely of all time, particularly one as massively hyped as that album. To start track
Good
one
choice.
By saying, you've anticipated this, and you might well be disappointed, but you won't be, because it's brilliant. I thought that was the height of cool.
Good, but I've never even noticed
as I translated the Odyssey.
Yeah, I've never even noticed that. That's such a good point. Brilliant choice. Lovely. Well done. Oh, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Ivo. Thank you very much for coming on. And I
It was lovely to talk to you, and also to get a couple of glimpses of the extended Bird household. Best of luck to all of you.
Yeah, you can sense it's fucking hard going.
Best of luck with the rest of the lockdown, and I'll put you in touch with my dad.
Oh yeah, of course. I feel when you say you'll put me in touch, you're going to give me his address, and it's going to be a handwritten letter.
You'll have to go through his PA, but you'll get there. You'll get there.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Ferdy.
A podcast from producer Paul.co.uk.